David, if we look now at Scotland on Sunday and Danny Garavelli, their columnist there, and Danny had covered in great detail the Alex Salmond trial, and there was a huge fallout from that. That's what she's looking at this week.
Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating. I mean, there's a slight subgenre in Scottish journalism sometimes of focusing on the most dysfunctional aspects of Scottish nationalism. That is the famous Cybernats, the extremely online social media activists. And sometimes this can be quite a tiresome little genre with people maybe getting back at their critics online. But in this case, what's happened is that Danny had written, I think, the most authoritative journalism on the Alex Salmond trial. She herself was subjected to quite a lot of abuse and conspiracy theory as a result of that. But rather than just hit back at her critics, she's written a really considered and thoughtful piece about some of the things that have emerged from that social media mess, from that bin fire that we all have on Twitter and Facebook. And she's talking in particular about attitudes to women following the Salmond trial, when of course his accusers were women. And she's talking about misogyny and paranoia being unleashed in the wake of the whole case. Now, she's talking about fact-light vitriol being spewed out by online warriors. She's been the target of some of this, but what's most concerning, I think, is the way in which you've got really quite serious levels of disinformation about the law. So Danny, for example, makes these very straightforward points. A lot of people believe that because Alex Salmond was found not guilty, that this necessarily means that people who accused them were themselves guilty of, for example, perjury or some other offence. And she's pointing out quite rightly that people have contested evidence in the courts all the time, and that if every single person who was a complainer in a case was to be deemed to be a liar, you would have basically the court system would break down. But I think it's really interesting this as well, because to a large extent this particular group of online activists have now split away from the mainstream SNP. It's almost as if they're enemies of the SNP rather than its supporters. Many of them are explicitly so. And Danny concludes by talking about some of the language that's been used by some of these people, including quite prominent people, such as the former Justice Secretary Ken McCaskill, who referred to dark forces. And she says this is not a rallying cry to measured voices in mainstream SNP, her complaints about this. She says that people in the Yes movement need to speak up against those prevaricators and equivocators who would rather invest in the pretense of dark forces than countenance the possibility Mr. Salmond might be flawed. Speak up, she says, before they destroy the thing you love. Very powerful piece of journalism, in my opinion.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Danny Garavelli is a brilliant writer anyway, but as you say, particularly powerful today, and again, underlined all the time. But, you know, you have to understand what the law actually says in all of this and what it means in all of this. And that's, as we're saying, Scotland on Sunday, Danny Garavelli.